everyone, it's Karan Jain from NayaOne. I'm here with Emma Kisby, CEO of Cogo, a green fintech, and we're just going to have some candid chat. Emma, thank you for making time.
Thanks,
and I'm going to cut straight to the chase and ask you a very hard question. So, we're both in businesses that work B2B with banks and financial service organizations. In your experience, what is the hardest challenge, or what is the opportunity when working with large organizations?
Yeah. So the first thing I talk about is the opportunity. I mentioned earlier today on the panel I was at, the IPCC stated that overconsumption is one of the key drivers of the climate crisis. And if we're really going to help address that, we need people to understand the impact of their spend and their consumption. And the best place to do that, to provide things like spending insights and the impact of your spend, is actually working with the banks and looking in their mobile banking experience. So banks have a massive opportunity to help us solve this climate crisis. But the challenge is that banks can be quite slow to operate. It's quite challenging to innovate. Even talking within our banking partners, they find it very difficult to navigate their own teams, to make things happen and to innovate and try things. And of course, there's lots to lose as a bank. You know, when you've got 8 million customers, 10 million customers, we've got a small open banking app with a few thousand people on it. We can test and learn, but it's okay to fail. Now, that's very different. So actually, one of the challenges is giving the banks that confidence to go for a solution and then surface it to their 8 million customers, 10 million customers. That's the impact.
And that is a big impact, right?
Yeah.
Because that improves lives of our end consumers at the end of the on the other side of the banks. So why is it so hard for banks to find the right teams, to collaborate internally? You work with a number of high street banks here, and that wouldn't have been an easy journey. So for the young companies coming through, what would be like one or two things that you'd say, watch out for that kind of behavior from the banks, and it's not an intended behavior, it's just the organizational structure sometimes.
Exactly that. It's navigation.
Navigation.
When you're working with thousands of employees in the banks, it's very easy to burn through a lot of time talking to lots of people who might be very interested in what you are doing, but not necessarily able to make a decision. I think one of the challenges specifically for us as a green fintech is that we work with the sustainability team or the ESG team, we work with the digital propositions team, we work with the mobile banking team, then we have to work with the tech teams. There's a lot of stakeholders within the business to try and manage and navigate and influence all those decisions. And it's really tough for the people in the banks. Absolutely,
and sometimes we find that people in the ESG team or in the sustainability team have not bought software before. So taking them through that journey and working through the procurement team, the security team, the cloud architecture, the tech organization, as well as the business organization, is a process, right? Is a process.
Especially on data when it comes
especially
to data.
And which all banks are very, very careful about, and the quality data is very, very important.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So one question I have that I think about it is, which is there are new ESG companies, green fintechs, every month.
Yeah.
The market is getting fairly clouded, right? Because from a bank's point of view, and these are the bankers I speak to, like, I don't know which one to work with. And I'm like, okay, well, I wish I could tell you which one to work with, that I can make them available for you to have your own judgment. As the CEO of a successful green fintech, how do you see that market?
So 4 years ago, when open banking came in, we launched this app, and we were creating personalised carbon footprints. We worked with Mike Berners-Lee. It had never really been done before. There were a couple of players out there, but it was a really lonely space. Not many people were doing it. We were quite siloed in kind of, we're just very alone in this space. Then in the last year, there's just people everywhere, as you say, right? Which is fantastic because it totally validates our solution.
Yeah.
But the challenge is it gets very confusing.
Yes.
It gets confusing for those people who are trying to buy the right solutions. And we hear this a lot, like, we've done this analysis and we're not quite sure. We're very lucky and privileged, and we've also worked really hard to work with a number of the world leading banks, so it does validate to a certain extent.
Absolutely, huge credibility.
Although they need to still go through the same due diligence. I think it's brilliant there's a lot of innovation happening in this space. Thank goodness for that, because we all need to innovate to solve the climate crisis, but not to create confusion. So one of the challenges we see is that lots of different ways of measuring things and impacts, and people looking to capitalise on this energy around the green economy, which is great, but it needs to be done in a robust way. So everything needs to be open and transparent in terms of how we're measuring and what we're doing.
And how many years would you give us all in terms of for the industry to figure out what this needs to look like?
Oh, Karen. Well, ideally, before 2030.
Okay, that's not that far.
I think 2030 is, was the UK net zero target, but I think in terms of us all accelerating pace, I don't think we're going to have an end solution to this. I think the pace will accelerate as we start to feel the consequences of the climate crisis more. It's quite scary for me, if I'm honest, talking to climate scientists day in, day out, and actually hearing the proper impact. You know, the climate anxiety is very real, because the science is real and the climate crisis is real.
And we see it.
We see it, right? So it's great that there's all this innovation. I hope that banks will be bolder, and actually working with NayaOne on the sandbox environment has been great, because we create these personalised carbon footprints, but actually to bring it to life and the bank's own data, and to show the art of the possibility and where that can take, not just now in terms of what we show, because there's a big gap. The intention action gap is huge. Consumers, there's a big area around carbon literacy and education that's required.
That is true.
But the opportunity around the banks in terms of how they can motivate and mobilise people to a low carbon economy is huge.
I couldn't agree more. And we find that it's okay to look at number of solutions. It's the speed you need to look at number of solutions, because it's the selection of the solution and actually getting to production so you can start making an impact to the economy as well as the society is where it matters. So nothing you don't know already. Parting question. For the audience who are in banks and have ESG and sustainability as part of their remit, and they've got to put solutions out there to help internally, help externally, help their consumer. What would be 2 to 3 things you tell them share with them in terms of where they should be starting their journey, or how they should be kind of demystifying that confusion that's in the market?
Yeah, I think the first thing is think differently. I think the challenge is looking at short-term commercial return. The reality is that everything needs to at some point financially return. But the reality is we need to start somewhere. And I think one of the things is think differently around the business case that we need. Because actually it's not necessarily short-term we're going to get a return on a year. But there's lots of opportunity long term. And then you look at the partnership we've got with NatWest, for example. They've really stolen a march in terms of leading the pack on this. And it gives them such an opportunity. That's not to say that others can't follow, to your point at the start, but it is kind of act differently, think differently around this. We need to find solutions, and we need to think differently around this green economy. The green economy shouldn't be a different thing. It should be just business as usual.
And it's not a goal that you reach. It's BAU. It's part of life, right?
And think about it as a personal passion. One of the most enjoyable parts of my job is that I work with people in banks who are really passionate about this space.
How amazing is that?
And they say it's the most fun they've ever had in banking. Someone very senior told me that. But he also says he can look his children in the eye and say, I'm doing something really positive in the bank to make a difference. So I think it's be bold, act faster, be pushier, and think differently.
That's pretty amazing. Thank you, Emma. I appreciate your time.
Thanks, Karen. Cheers.
Cheers.